What is game balance? If you're into competitive games, I'm sure you have a pretty decent answer. But can you answer me this question? How do we know when a game is finally balanced? Let me take you back to the early 2010s. League of Legends is one of the most popular competitive games of all time, and on February 16th, 2011, the developers released a patch containing the following change for Vladimir's Sanguine Pool. Removed. On-cast bonus, movement speed. The player sentiment after playing the update was rough. Users rushed online to express how bad this change felt. Vladimir's play rate plummeted, and his win rate also decreased. But here's the twist. The developer had forgotten to submit the files for that particular change, and so it never actually went out to players. Game balance isn't real. Okay, I know that might sound ridiculous and dramatic to some of you. Developers tune the game to try to achieve balance. Again, tuning is the act, balance is the goal. So while tuning is easily defined, we need to ask, what does game balance as a goal even mean if, as we just learned, simply telling players that something in the game has changed when it has not can so deeply affect their perception of the game's balance? Game balance isn't real. That's right, game balance is
mostly just vibes.
So a problem we're about to run into is that game balance
Doesn't have just one definition that everyone agrees on.
What?
Kassadin broke the entire game so hard that nobody was even allowed to play him. Let me explain. In 2014, patch 4.4 rolled out adjustments to Kassadin's Riftwalk Ultimate that were supposed to modernize his kit. What it actually did was give him near infinite teleportation on a cooldown that decreased every time he used his other ability. His Null Sphere silenced enemies on contact. His Netherblade stole mana. His Force Pulse dealt AoE damage to everyone around him, and Riftwalk let him blink across the map like he was playing a completely different game from everyone else. Here's the thing. There was literally no counterplay. You couldn't catch him because he'd teleport away. You couldn't duel him because his damage and mobility made every trade one-sided. You couldn't avoid him because he could initiate from halfway across the lane before you even finished typing SS in chat. Every tool that should theoretically counter a melee magic damage dealer simply didn't work because the guy refused to stay in one place long enough for any of it to matter. And the ban rate tells the whole story. It started at 80%, bad but manageable. Then it climbed to 90%, then it hit 95%, then 97%. Some regions reported it creeping even higher than that, approaching numbers that shouldn't be mathematically possible in a game with 10 bans. Kassadin was being banned in millions of games per month. He wasn't just the strongest champion in League of Legends. He was a champion that functionally did not exist in ranked play because the entire player base collectively decided that removing him from the game was the only correct strategy.
Each part of the audience for your game is looking for something different based on their own ideas of what successful game balance looks like to them. Most players' primary driver for wanting game balance is the idea of fairness. They think they want a game in which all options are equally viable, and they can rank up or win a tournament with any character or weapon or team comp that they choose. Viewers matter a lot to any modern competitive games ecosystem. And the viewer's primary driver for wanting game balance is variety. They want to tune into live streams and see like a lot of different characters and team compositions and weapons represented to keep things interesting. They want to see lots of play styles interacting with each other, especially when viewing tournaments. It's a lot less fun when the top 8 character selections look like this. Data lies. On the first day of my high school statistics class, our teacher shared with us a quote from early 20th century Austrian psychiatrist Wilhelm Steckel. Statistics is the art of lying by means of figures. That quote really stuck with me. As it turns out, if you're clever, you can use data to prove almost any point you want. Or worse, data can convince you of a false truth. Data can be very useful in convincing your development teammates of a design direction. It's much less useful for finding the right tuning decision to make for your audience. Checking telemetry from League of Legends, you might find that the item Mejai's Soul Stealer has an absurdly high win rate, often close to 80%, but this statistic is highly misleading. The item is rarely purchased unless you're already winning, which means the player purchasing it was already very likely to win before making the purchase. The developers understood why the win rate for this item was the way it was, and that kept them from making the mistake of trusting the numbers alone and making a poor tuning decision. This means that in order to find guidance within the numbers, you need an extraordinary amount of context. Remember that League of Legends example from the start of the video about Vladimir's Sanguine Pool? That wasn't the only time something like that happened in League. When the champion Riven was released, she was viewed by the community as weak. Riot devs apparently agreed and hotfixed in some buffs for the character. Shortly after posting the hotfix notes on the forums, the character's play rate spiked and the feedback was very positive. Players reported how good the buffs felt and what a difference they made, but the hotfix hadn't actually gone live yet. The character was unchanged. Game balance is mostly vibes.
By the time she hit the live servers, there was a small problem. Riven was extremely underpowered, which meant that she got multiple buffs on a hotfix within the first week. By the time Season 2 had rolled around, players somewhat realized that she was not necessarily worth playing compared to other strong champions at the time, such as Senzel and Jarvan. She was too high risk for too low of a reward, despite her ability to snowball games very well. Relatively speaking, she was super fun to play, and was popular for the general player base, but for the players who were higher elo and higher ranked, she saw low amounts of play as players looking to join the pro circuit were playing much stronger meta picks. The interesting thing, and something that I covered in my history of top lane video, is that during this time frame, sustain was really important. Sustain was the meta, and Riven struggled with this, having no natural sustain in her kit. However, back then, she had the single highest base health regen of any champion. Her base health regen was off the charts, which meant that she was a pretty good jungler. Back then, there was no red smite and warrior enchantment, and the junglers had to start Doran's blades, so stacking a few Doran's blades on Riven with her base health regen, as well as having some of the combat stats, made her early game quite good. There are some older VODs that you can find on YouTube of Stonewall and Dyrus playing her in the jungle and being fairly successful. It seemed like, at least at the time, this was her most effective role for the general player base, and even though she didn't see much competitive play, this is really where she started to thrive as a jungler. The biggest event for Riven in Season 3 was a player named Barcode Killer, who was taking NA solo queue by storm, playing mainly Riven and dominating NA solo queue, going 20-1 in Diamond 1. Even people like Boxbox and Scar would watch him play and be amazed by how good a player he could be on the champion.
Oh my god, wow! What the f***? Best Riven NA, move over! There's a new god in town.
Eventually, it was discovered just who this player was. It was Faker. He had come over from Korea for Season 3 Worlds, and to practice, decided to tear up NA solo queue with Riven. This practice ended up paying off a lot, where in Worlds he used Riven as a counter pick to a very meta champion in the mid lane, Zed. He almost single-handedly popularized Riven with just how obscenely good he was at the champion, showing many players that when mastered, Riven was a force to be reckoned with. And because of the showings by Faker and Faker's Riven and other streamers, for Season 4, Riven's popularity exploded. Unfortunately, Riot saw her success and ended up having to nerf her repeatedly through Seasons 4 and Season 5 because players slowly grew better at the champion and started putting in a lot of time. This led to professional mid lane players picking her up and learning her because for several patches she pretty much was the best mid lane champion. Players who you might think never in a million years should be playing Riven were still doing it because she really just was that good. It's interesting because it was shown, however, if you weren't good at Riven, then yeah, she still was not that good. Without practice, she was not necessarily a face role champion, especially in the higher ranks or in competitive play.
Let's say that you look at your character pick rates, and one of the characters is very underrepresented. It's a lot less fun when the top 8 character selections look like this. Well, unfortunately, even though most of them don't mean to, players frequently lie too. If you've been in or around game dev long enough, you've certainly heard the phrase, players don't know what they want. This isn't entirely true in my experience. There's a relatively well-known clip of me from the wonderful Fight On Killer Instinct documentary by Hold Back to Block, in which I tell an anecdote about a time when the KI community rallied together and really wanted us to nerf Jago. Specifically, his ability to heal himself by landing fireballs during his instinct mode made them feel like they had to kill him 3 times instead of 2. But nerfing his healing, as they'd requested, would have cut away at the character's core identity and a large part of what makes him unique and fun to play. The community was laser focused on seeing the healing as the problem, and their view of the game was that Jago was either too strong or too frustrating to play against, depending on who you asked. Whether this was the true state of the game or not is not relevant. They believed Jago was a problem, and their perception, no matter how flawed, is the reality they live in. To tune games properly, you must accept this. A player's perception is their reality. So instead of succumbing to the community pressure campaign and nerfing Jago's healing, we took a different approach that allowed us to maintain his fun and unique healing gimmick, while weakening some of the more brainless parts of his kit that allowed him to negate his intended weaknesses too easily. We took a different approach that allowed us to maintain his fun and unique healing gimmick, while weakening some of the more brainless parts of his kit
that allowed him to negate his intended weaknesses too easily.
The community cooked us pretty hard for a few weeks, insisting that this wasn't the change they asked for and wouldn't make a difference. But a few weeks after that, complaining about Jago had all but stopped. Fairness should not and cannot ever be a goal. Why? Because no 2 players can ever universally agree on what is fair. It's an emotional metric that changes by the minute depending on who you ask, the results of their latest ranked match, what salty players showed up on their social media algorithm that day. It is simply not an achievable goal, because game balance is mostly vibes. Most players' primary driver for wanting game balance is the idea of fairness. They think they want a game in which all options are equally viable, and they can rank up or win a tournament with any character or weapon or team comp that they choose. Players knew they wanted a weaker Jago. It's just that their idea of how to do it would have had way worse knockdown effects on the game and Jago player base than what we landed on. The favorite goal of viewers is variety. A variety is not the result of mathematical balance or fairness. It's a lot less fun when the top 8 character selections look like this. It's the result of enabling diverse player expression. Let me explain why. Each individual player has their own playstyle and their own view on what aspects of your game or characters are fun. This includes the type of risks different players want to take when trying to win. Some players want to play it as safe as possible and focus on reactions with a low-risk, low-reward strategy. Other players may want to gamble, taking big bets and trying to get maximum rewards. And everything in between those two extremes exists as well. If a character is harder to learn and pilot and optimize, should that character be equal in theoretical power output with a character that's trivial to learn and pilot and optimize? We won't often achieve tournament variety by flattening win rate and use rates, because doing so flattens out the number of reasons different players gravitate toward different characters or play patterns. It's the quantity of different motivators that you offer to your players that breeds variety. Despite not being widely considered to have the most balanced roster, the original version of Guilty Gear Xrd Sign would frequently see large variety of characters in tournament top 8s. Why? Because the characters are so different and diverse that they appeal strongly to different player types. It's a lot less fun when the top 8 character selections look like this. And finally, the third goal that we skipped over at the beginning, the only real and true goal worth pursuing with game tuning efforts: player retention. Retention is all about making your existing players want to play more, or at a bare minimum, preventing them from quitting. Fairness is a cute idea. Variety is nice to have if you can get it, but if players aren't playing, there isn't any point to anything you might change in your game.
Please spare us your presence. Thank you.